If you knew for certain that you would die before the age of 40, what would you do to make sure the world never forgot you? The Vikings found an answer that still stands, visible in the Norwegian landscape today. And in this video, we're gonna show you exactly what they did and what it cost them. Across Scandinavia, the wealthiest and most powerful Vikings did something that looks, at first, like an enormous waste. They took their finest ship, the most valuable object their society could build, and buried it, on purpose, forever. That ship is still there today, under a hill most people walk past without a second thought. And that's exactly the point. Because for a Viking chieftain, the worst death wasn't dying in battle. It was being forgotten. Burying a ship wasn't a burial. It was a deliberate act of permanence, a way to reshape the landscape itself, so that centuries later, people would still point to that hill and say, "This is where the chief sleeps." Welcome back to Norse Reborn. This is the story of why the Vikings buried their most precious technology in the ground, and what that tells us about how they saw death itself. Before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who believes history is written in bone and blood, not just ink, hit subscribe. To understand why the Vikings buried entire ships in the ground, you have to understand how they saw death itself. There was no guaranteed afterlife of comfort. What mattered was how you would be remembered, and for how long. Some of these mounds were enormous. At Jelling in Denmark, the largest stands over 11 meters high. That's not a grave. That's a structure built to outlast empires. And that's exactly the point. A ship sailing past a century later would still see it and ask, who was powerful enough to deserve this? A burial mound wasn't just a grave. It was a permanent edit to the landscape itself, visible from the water, from the road, from anyone passing by for generations to come. Across Scandinavia and the lands the Vikings touched, archaeologists have found dozens of these ship burials. Oseberg in Norway, Gokstad, 15 miles away, Ladby in Denmark, Sutton Hoo on the English coast. Different places, different centuries, the same impulse, repeated again and again. 15 miles from Oseberg, archaeologists found a second ship. This one would reveal something Oseberg never could. What happens when someone wants you erased, not remembered? In 1880, two boys digging in a field near Sandefjord, Norway, found something extraordinary, almost identical to what would be found at Oseberg, just a few miles away. Another ship, another grave. But this time, the story took a darker turn. Inside, archaeologists found the skeleton of a powerfully built man, somewhere in his 40s or 50s, over 6 feet tall, in an age when most men stood several inches shorter. Buried with him, 12 horses, 6 dogs, even a peacock, an animal that had to come from thousands of miles away. In 2007, scientists reopened the case using modern forensics. What they found rewrote the story. The man's legs bore at least 5 or 6 deep cuts, from an axe, a sword, possibly more than one weapon. There were no signs of healing. This man died violently, and very possibly in battle. For decades, This skeleton was assumed to belong to a legendary king named Olaf Gokstad Alf. Tree ring dating later proved that theory wrong. Olaf had died 50 years before this ship was even built. His real identity remains unknown to this day. A man powerful enough to command 12 horses and a peacock from the other side of the world. And we don't even know his name. But here's where the story turns. Decades after the burial, someone deliberately dug into this mound. Not just to rob it, though valuables were taken. They specifically targeted the body, breaking it apart, scattering the bones. Some archaeologists believe this was the work of King Harald Bluetooth of Denmark, the same king who would later unite Denmark under one crown. Destroying a rival chieftain's grave wasn't vandalism. It was a political weapon. If the body and the memory disappeared, so did the family's claim to power. The Vikings, who built these mounds to be remembered forever, also knew exactly how to make an enemy disappear. Gokstad wasn't the only grave someone tried to silence. Across the water in Denmark, there's only one ship burial like this ever found. At Ladby, around 925 AD, a local ruler, we don't know his name, his title, or even his face, was laid to rest in a 22-meter warship, accompanied by 11 horses and 3 or 4 dogs. This is roughly 350 miles east of Oseberg, across the water. Proof that this wasn't a local custom, it was a belief system shared across the entire Viking world. One detail stands out more than the gold thread in his clothes or the weapons at his side. A small bronze dog leash, gilded and finely decorated. The kind of object that tells you someone loved these sea animals enough to bury them in style, not just as offerings, but as companions for whatever came next. But within a generation or two of the burial, someone broke into the mound. They didn't just steal valuables. They removed the body entirely, every bone, as if the goal wasn't theft, it was erasure. Some historians link this to the same period when the Jelling dynasty was consolidating power across Denmark. A petty king's grave deliberately emptied at the exact moment a new dynasty needed every rival's legacy to disappear. We'll likely never know for certain. What's left isn't a king. It's an outline in the dirt, a leash for dogs whose names we'll never know, and a question nobody can fully answer. Every grave we've covered so far is silent. Bones, wood, metal, and guesswork. But one source breaks that silence completely. Because someone was actually there to watch a ship funeral happen in real time and wrote down everything he saw. In 921 AD, a Baghdad scholar named Ahmad ibn Fadlan traveled thousands of miles north as part of a diplomatic mission. Along the Volga River, he encountered a group of Norse traders the locals called the Rus, and he watched one of them die. Here's what's strange. For over 1,000 years, almost nobody outside the Islamic world knew this account existed. It survived only because a 13th century geographer happened to copy fragments of it into his own work. If he hadn't, this entire eyewitness record, the only one of its kind, would have been lost forever. Ibn Fadlan wrote down what he saw in extraordinary detail. The only surviving first-hand account of a Viking ship funeral by someone who was actually there. Modern historians still debate how reliable parts of his account are, but the core of what he describes lines up with what archaeology has found in ship graves across Scandinavia. He described a chieftain's body kept in cold storage for 10 days while preparations were made. New clothes were woven, food and drink were prepared, and, in a detail that still unsettles historians today, one of the women in the camp volunteered to die alongside him, believing she would join him in the next life. What Ibn Fadlan witnessed was not a quiet, solemn farewell. It was loud, communal, and, by his own account as an outsider, deeply unsettling to watch. He was a guest in a culture whose relationship with death was almost the opposite of his own. And then the ship was set alight. In under an hour, Ibn Fadlan wrote nothing remained. Ship, body, and offerings reduced to ash. One witness asked him why the Norse burned their dead instead of burying them slowly to rot, as his own people did. The answer he received has been quoted by historians ever since. "You bury the people you love in the ground, where insects and worms will eat them. We burn them in an instant so they enter paradise at once." There's one more piece to this pattern, and it comes from the opposite direction. In England, archaeologists found a ship grave with no body at all. Not stolen, not erased on purpose, just gone, dissolved by acidic soil over 13 centuries. At Sutton Hoo, all that remained was a human-shaped gap among the treasures, until scientists found traces of phosphate in the soil decades later. Proof that a body really had been there. The ship survived. The grave goods survived. The person himself simply vanished. 4 ships, 4 different fates. Oseberg preserved by accident. Gokstad deliberately destroyed. Ladby emptied entirely. Sutton Hoo dissolved by time itself. The Vikings who built these mounds wanted permanence. They wanted to be impossible to forget. Some of them got exactly that, though not always for the reasons they intended. Whether preserved, erased, or simply lost to time, these ships all carry the same message. Sent forward by people who knew exactly how short life could be. Remember that we were here.